Her scar scared the world, but one human's gaze made her flutter with desire. The Scarred Princess. The twin suns of Zephyros 7 cast their perpetual glow through the crystalline spires of the palace, refracting into 1,000 dancing colors. Lyra Solon stood before her reflection in the polished obsidian mirror, tracing the jagged silver mark that ran from her temple to her jaw. The scar caught the light differently than her pale blue skin, shimmering with an almost metallic quality that made it impossible to ignore. She remembered the day it happened. 10 years ago, when she was barely 16, an explosion in the royal laboratory had sent shards of experimental crystal flying. While others had been protected by the blast shields, young Lyra had been too curious, too eager to see her father's latest discovery. The largest shard had caught her face, and though the wound had healed, it left behind this permanent reminder of her recklessness. On Zephyros 7, physical perfection wasn't merely valued, it was expected, especially of royalty. The planet's culture had evolved around crystalline beauty, where unblemished skin was considered a reflection of inner purity and worthiness to lead. Lyra's scar had transformed her from beloved princess to a source of whispered pity and averted eyes. "Your Highness, the council awaits," Captain Joran announced from the doorway, his voice gentle but formal. Even he, her most loyal guard, kept his gaze slightly to the left of her face. Lyra smoothed the silver fabric of her gown and lifted her chin. She had learned to wear authority like armor, even if she couldn't wear perfection. The council meetings were torture, watching Chancellor Vexis speak over her, observing Lady Thessa's barely concealed smirks, enduring the uncomfortable silence that followed whenever she voiced an opinion. As she walked through the corridors, servants pressed themselves against the walls, bowing but never making eye contact. Children whispered and pointed until their parents hurried them away. Each interaction was a small cut, a reminder that she was seen as damaged, lesser, unworthy. "There's also news, Princess," Joran continued as they approached the council chamber. "A human delegation arrives tomorrow. They wish to establish trade agreements." Lyra nodded absently. Another day of being invisible while others conducted her kingdom's business. Another day of loneliness in a palace full of people. Little did she know, tomorrow would change everything. Her scar scared the world, but one human's gaze made her flutter with desire. The Scarred Princess. The twin suns of Zephyros 7 cast their perpetual glow through the crystalline spires of the palace, refracting into 1,000 dancing colors. Lyra Solon stood before her reflection in the polished obsidian mirror, tracing the jagged silver mark that ran from her temple to her jaw. The scar caught the light differently than her pale blue skin, shimmering with an almost metallic quality that made it impossible to ignore. She remembered the day it happened. 10 years ago, when she was barely 16, an explosion in the royal laboratory had sent shards of experimental crystal flying. While others had been protected by the blast shields, young Lyra had been too curious, too eager to see her father's latest discovery. The largest shard had caught her face, and though the wound had healed, it left behind this permanent reminder of her recklessness. On Zephyros 7, physical perfection wasn't merely valued, it was expected, especially of royalty. The planet's culture had evolved around crystalline beauty, where unblemished skin was considered a reflection of inner purity and worthiness to lead. Lyra's scar had transformed her from beloved princess to a source of whispered pity and averted eyes. "Your Highness, the council awaits," Captain Joran announced from the doorway, his voice gentle but formal. Even he, her most loyal guard, kept his gaze slightly to the left of her face. Lyra smoothed the silver fabric of her gown and lifted her chin. She had learned to wear authority like armor, even if she couldn't wear perfection. The council meetings were torture, watching Chancellor Vexis speak over her, observing Lady Thessa's barely concealed smirks, enduring the uncomfortable silence that followed whenever she voiced an opinion. As she walked through the corridors, servants pressed themselves against the walls, bowing but never making eye contact. Children whispered and pointed until their parents hurried them away. Each interaction was a small cut, a reminder that she was seen as damaged, lesser, unworthy. "There's also news, Princess," Joran continued as they approached the council chamber. "A human delegation arrives tomorrow. They wish to establish trade agreements." Lyra nodded absently. Another day of being invisible while others conducted her kingdom's business. Another day of loneliness in a palace full of people. Little did she know, tomorrow would change everything. The human who saw her. The grand reception hall glittered with bioluminescent flowers and floating crystal chandeliers. Lyra stood on the dais beside her throne, watching the assembly with practiced detachment. The Zephyrosian nobles had arranged themselves in their finest garments, eager to impress the human visitors and secure favorable trade positions for their families. Chancellor Vexis droned on about economic projections while Lyra's mind wandered. She had perfected the art of looking engaged while feeling utterly absent. Her role had become purely ceremonial, a figurehead whose opinions were politely ignored. The massive doors opened, and the human delegation entered. Lyra straightened instinctively. She had seen images of humans before, but witnessing them in person was startling. They seemed so solid. Where her people were willowy and ethereal, these visitors moved with a grounded confidence. Their skin lacked the luminescent quality of Zephyrosians, instead showing warm earth tones that spoke of a different sun, a different world. And then she saw him. Marcus Reed walked at the center of the group, his dark hair slightly tousled, his features strong and open. He wore the deep blue uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps, and something about his bearing suggested both strength and gentleness. As the delegation approached the dais, his eyes swept the room before landing on her. Lyra braced herself for the familiar pattern, the initial glance, the moment of recognition, the subtle flinch, the polite avoidance. She had seen it 10,000 times. But Marcus didn't flinch. His gaze held hers, and something flickered in his warm brown eyes. Not pity. Not discomfort. Something else entirely, interest, perhaps even admiration. He looked at her the way people looked at the sunset over the crystal canyons, with appreciation for something beautiful and unique. Heat bloomed in Lyra's chest, spreading through her like liquid starlight. Her pulse quickened. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Princess Lyra Solon, Chancellor Vexis was saying, "May I present Marcus Reed, Chief Liaison of Earth's Outer Colonies Division." Marcus stepped forward and bowed with perfect courtesy. "Your Highness, it's an honor. Your world is breathtaking, and its princess even more so." The words were diplomatic, standard greeting fare. But the way he said them, the way his eyes never left hers, the slight smile that touched his lips, there was nothing standard about it. "Welcome to Zephyros 7, Mr. Reed," Lyra managed, surprised by the steadiness of her voice despite her racing heart. "We hope your stay will be both productive and enlightening." "I'm certain it will be," Marcus replied, and something in his tone felt like a promise meant only for her. The formal reception continued, but Lyra barely registered it. She was acutely aware of Marcus's presence across the room, the occasional glances they exchanged, the magnetic pull she couldn't explain. Lady Thessa inserted herself into the human delegation circle, laughing too loudly, touching Marcus's arm with calculated charm. But he seemed distracted, his attention repeatedly drifting back to the dais. When the reception finally moved to the Crystal Gardens for refreshments, Lyra found herself alone near the moonflower pools. She needed air, space to process the strange feelings swirling through her. "The gardens are incredible," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Marcus approaching, 2 glasses of starfruit wine in his hands. He offered her one, and their fingers brushed during the exchange. That simple touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "They're my refuge," Lyra admitted, then wondered why she was being so honest with a stranger. "I can understand why. Back on Earth, I grew up near the ocean. Whenever the world felt too heavy, I'd walk the beaches." He gazed at the bioluminescent flowers floating on the water. "This reminds me of that, beautiful, peaceful, genuine." "Genuine," Lyra repeated. Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression earnest. Everything else in there felt like performance. Careful words, calculated movements, people wearing masks. His voice softened. "But you, when you speak, when you look at something, I see real emotion. Real thought. It's refreshing." Lyra's hand unconsciously moved toward her scar, an old defensive habit. Marcus's eyes followed the movement without hesitation, without the usual discomfort. "Does it bother you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "My scar." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes. "Bother me?" No. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It makes me wonder what story it tells. What strength it took to survive whatever caused it. What it means to you. Tears pricked at Lyra's eyes. No one had ever asked what it meant to her. They only saw what it meant to them: imperfection, diminishment, shame. I was curious once, she whispered. I wanted to understand everything, to push boundaries. This was the price. Then it's a mark of courage, Marcus said simply. Of someone who dared to reach for knowledge instead of playing it safe. He smiled. Where I come from, we'd call that admirable. Something cracked open inside Lyra's chest, a door she'd kept locked for 10 years. And for the first time since the accident, she smiled genuinely, freely, without thinking about how the expression might distort her scar. Under the light of Zephyros 7's twin moons, surrounded by floating flowers and crystal fountains, Lyra felt the first flutter of something dangerous and wonderful. Desire. Blossoming beneath starlight. The following days blurred together in a way that made Lyra feel as though she'd stepped into a dream. Marcus had requested a cultural liaison to help him understand Zephyrosian customs, and Lyra had volunteered before Chancellor Vexis could assign someone else. For the first time in years, she had a reason to look forward to each morning. They met in the Royal Archives initially, surrounded by ancient crystal tablets that told Zephyros 7's history. Marcus listened with genuine fascination as Lyra explained her world's evolution, how her people had learned to harness the planet's crystalline structures for energy, communication, and art. He asked thoughtful questions that showed he saw beyond the surface, that he understood the complexity beneath the beauty. But it was during their evening walks through the abandoned East Gardens that their connection deepened into something neither could deny. Why is this section closed off? Marcus asked one evening, as they ventured past the ornamental gates into a wilderness of overgrown moonflowers and wild crystal formations. After my accident, I stopped coming to public areas, Lyra explained, pushing aside a curtain of silver vines. I found this place by chance. No one maintains it, so no one comes here. It became mine. The garden was indeed magnificent in its wildness, untamed beauty that felt honest and raw. Marcus followed her to a small clearing where a natural spring fed into a pool that reflected the emerging stars. I understand hiding, Marcus said softly, settling beside her on the moss-covered stones. After my mother died, I disappeared into my work for years. Threw myself into diplomacy because it meant wearing a professional mask. No one expects a diplomat to feel too much. Lyra turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that matched her own. What made you stop hiding? I haven't. Not until now. His hand found hers in the space between them, fingers intertwining with a naturalness that stole her breath. Something about you makes me want to be real again, Lyra. Makes me remember what it feels like to connect with someone genuinely. Her name on his lips felt intimate, sacred. On Zephyros 7, using a royal's personal name without title was reserved for family and lovers. Marcus didn't know that, but Lyra didn't correct him. She liked the way it sounded. I felt invisible for so long, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Even before the scar, I think. My parents loved me, but they were always so busy with governing. And after I became flawed, it was like I disappeared entirely. People look through me now, not at me. Then they're fools. Marcus shifted closer, his free hand rising to her face. She held her breath as his fingers traced the line of her scar with infinite gentleness. This doesn't diminish you, Lyra. It's part of your story, part of what makes you who you are. And who you are is extraordinary. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that transcended physical sensation. No one had ever touched her scar tenderly, as though it was something precious rather than shameful. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and Marcus brushed them away with his thumb. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Lyra answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative and questioning. But as Marcus's arms wrapped around her and she melted against him, it deepened into something passionate and consuming. His lips moved against hers with a hunger that matched her own, 10 years of loneliness and longing pouring into this single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Lyra felt transformed. Marcus rested his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face as though she was something infinitely valuable. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Like my heart might burst from my chest." "I know the feeling," Marcus murmured, pressing another soft kiss to her lips, then her cheek, then, deliberately, reverently, along the length of her scar. "You're beautiful, Lyra. Every part of you." They spent hours in that hidden garden, talking between kisses, learning each other's stories, mapping the contours of this unexpected connection. Marcus told her about Earth's oceans and forests, about his childhood dreams of exploring the stars, about the loneliness of always being the outsider in foreign worlds. Lyra shared her memories of a time before the accident, her love of science and discovery, her secret poetry that she'd never shown anyone. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, they moved closer together for warmth. Lyra rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, his arms secure around her, feeling safer than she had in years. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "You'll leave eventually. The trade agreements will be finalized, and you'll return to Earth." "Then we'll find a way," Marcus replied firmly. "I'm not walking away from this, Lyra. Not from you. I don't care about protocols or politics or the distance between our worlds. This, what we have, it's too rare to abandon." She tilted her face up to kiss him again, pouring all her hope and fear and desperate desire into it. His response was equally fervent, his hands tangling in her silver hair, both of them lost in the intensity of new love. Neither noticed the figure watching from the shadows beyond the garden gate, jealous eyes glittering in the starlight. Lady Thessa turned away with a cruel smile, already planning how to use this information. Shadows of jealousy. The palace hummed with whispers. Lyra noticed the change immediately, the way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, the pointed looks exchanged between courtiers, the barely concealed smirks from Lady Thessa's circle. Something had shifted in the 3 days since that first kiss in the garden, and the atmosphere felt poisonous. She was reviewing trade documents in her private study when Chancellor Vexis entered without knocking, his crystalline features sharp with displeasure. "Princess, we need to discuss your association with a human diplomat." Lyra's spine stiffened. "My work with Mr. Reed is purely professional. He requires cultural guidance for the negotiations." "Is that what you call midnight meetings in the abandoned gardens?" Vexis's voice dripped with false concern. "Princess, I understand loneliness might cloud your judgment, but you must consider your position. The human will leave. They always do. And you'll be left with a damaged reputation on top of everything else." The cruelty of his words landed like physical blows. "You forget yourself, Chancellor. My personal affairs are not your concern." "Everything about you is my concern when it affects Zephyros 7's standing," Vexis countered coldly. "Lady Thessa has been quite vocal about your impropriety. Other nobles are beginning to question your fitness to rule. Some suggest that perhaps someone more stable should assume greater responsibilities." The threat was clear. Vexis had always coveted more power, and now he saw an opportunity to seize it by painting her as unfit, distracted by an impossible romance with an alien. After he left, Lyra sat trembling with anger and fear. She wanted to run to Marcus, to feel his arms around her, but that would only feed the rumors. Instead, she remained frozen, caught between duty and desire. Marcus found her there an hour later, having bypassed palace protocol to reach her directly. One look at her face told him something was wrong. What happened? He crossed the room immediately, kneeling beside her chair. "They know about us," Lyra said quietly. "Thessa must have seen us. Now Vexis is using it against me, threatening my position." She met his eyes, her own swimming with tears. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm being foolish, risking everything for something that can't last. "Don't say that." Marcus took her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. "Don't let them make you believe our connection is wrong or shameful." "But you will leave," Lyra whispered. "Your mission will end, and you'll return to Earth, and I'll be here, alone again, except now everyone will know how desperate I was for someone to see me." Marcus pulled her from the chair into his arms, holding her tightly. "Listen to me. I've been offered a permanent posting as Earth's ambassador to Zephyros 7. I was going to surprise you tonight, but you need to hear it now. I'm not leaving, Lyra. I'm choosing to stay. She pulled back to search his face. You'd give up your career advancement? Earth? For me. For us, he corrected. I've spent my entire life moving from planet to planet, never belonging anywhere. But with you, I've found something worth staying for. Something worth fighting for. Their kiss was desperate, hungry, filled with the fear of almost losing each other. Marcus lifted her, carrying her to the cushioned window seat where starlight spilled across them. His hands traced the curves of her body through the thin fabric of her gown, igniting fires everywhere he touched. I want you, Lyra breathed against his lips, her fingers working at the fastenings of his uniform. I want to feel alive, to feel wanted. Make me forget everything but this. You are wanted, Marcus murmured, his lips trailing down her neck, across her collarbone. You're desired, treasured, loved. He paused, pulling back to meet her eyes. I love you, Lyra. Completely. Eternally. The words shattered something inside her. I love you too, she gasped, and then there was only sensation. Skin against skin, whispered endearments, the exquisite pleasure of being truly known and accepted. They made love slowly, tenderly, mapping each other's bodies with reverent touches and passionate kisses. Marcus worshipped every part of her, paying special attention to her scar, pressing kisses along its length until Lyra wept with the beauty of being loved so completely. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they lay in comfortable silence until reality intruded once more. Vexis won't stop, Lyra said quietly. He wants power, and I'm the obstacle. If he can prove I'm unfit, emotionally compromised, distracted by a human, he'll have the council remove me from succession. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then we need to turn the situation around. Make your relationship with me a strength rather than a weakness. How? My people value perfection and conformity. A scarred princess in love with an alien is their nightmare. Or, Marcus said thoughtfully, it's exactly the evolution they need. You said your scar came from pushing boundaries, from seeking knowledge. Maybe it's time Zephyros 7 learned to value courage over appearance, authenticity over perfection. Before Lyra could respond, Captain Joran burst through the door, his expression grave. Princess, Chancellor Vexis has called an emergency council session. He's presenting evidence of impropriety. He's moving to have you declared unfit to rule. Joran's eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Lyra. You need to come now. And you should know, Lady Thessa claims to have recordings of your private moments together. She's threatening to release them publicly unless you renounce your claim to the throne. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face. This was worse than she'd imagined, not just political maneuvering, but outright blackmail and character assassination. Marcus stood, pulling her to her feet. Then we go together. We face them together. And we show them that their princess is stronger than they ever imagined. Hand in hand, they left the study to confront the Vipers waiting in the council chamber, unaware that Captain Joran had been quietly gathering evidence of his own, proof of Vexis's corruption that might just save them all.